But I do know that there is science around this. We are coded as men to set aside our emotions in emergencies. But what if I told you this same coding also works in the trades? How hard would it be for you to do your job if you're sitting there welding one day and you have an emotional breakdown? Or you're working on a car and you start crying? Or you're up on the top of a ladder or halfway up a skyscraper and anxiety takes you? When does emotional vulnerability become a problem? Have you ever had, have you ever struggled to hold your emotions in check when an emergency happens? Say you're driving down the road with your family and you hit a deer. Have you struggled with your emotions at that point? Have you felt angry or sad or hurt or a high level of compassion for that deer? Have you ever wondered why you don't? Why your emotions are not taking control of you at that point when your entire family maybe, could be, often is emotionally distraught, like having a very difficult time that you just hurt or even possibly killed Bambi. I mean, it's not as though you did it on purpose. But have you ever wondered why you're able to just compartmentalize that, deal with it, move on? Some guys do. Some guys do wonder why they don't just break down. Because quite honestly, most women do. It's a very emotionally disturbing experience for them to hit a deer while they're driving. Not all women, but a lot of them. Why isn't it so the case for most men? Have you ever had an emotional breakdown when you're, say, pulling somebody from a burning building or rescuing someone who's drowning? Even if you can't swim, even if you're not a firefighter, have you ever been performing first aid on somebody, CPR specifically, and not had the emotional reaction? Or if you did, it was much after the event, after you finished dealing with it. This is a common experience for a lot of guys and some women that we don't feel those emotions during the event. And some of us don't feel them very strongly even afterwards. Why is that? Well, there is science around it, and I'm not much of a scientist, nor have I read all the science, but I do know that there is science around this. We are coded as men to set aside our emotions in emergencies. But what if I told you this same coding also works in the trades? How hard would it be for you to do your job if you're sitting there welding one day and you have an emotional breakdown? Or you're working on a car and you start crying? Or you're up on the top of a ladder or halfway up a skyscraper and anxiety takes you? Why isn't this more common, especially for men? For the same reason that we don't get bothered by emergencies, by why we're not overcome by our emotions during emergencies. See, emotional intelligence for a warrior type is a whole different topic, a whole different truth, a whole different reality than emotional intelligence for most other people. For the emotionally sensitive guy or for the woman or feminine person, the emotional intelligence is a nuanced um, and multifaceted, complex thing. How can we be emotionally intelligent? How can we be available and compassionate and even empathetic? But for a warrior, it's a much more simple process because the warriors who are raised as warriors, and by warriors, I don't just mean soldiers and fighters, I mean all of the guys who use their body to protect and provide. All of the guys who were in the trades, who were in emergency services, and of course, soldiers as well. That includes them. And even athletes, high performing athletes. A lot of them, if they let the emotions get control of them, they become far less effective at those things. Far less effective, not just a little less effective, but far less effective. And this is why a lot of these guys at the end of the day, when they come home from work or come home from a difficult situation or find themselves resting or sitting back and processing what happened to them, they don't get deeply emotional. And for many of them, it's actually not helpful to discuss or process or feel the event. Some guys have to. Some guys aren't warriors. But for the warrior type guys, for those men who just go out and get it done and do what's got to be done and put in their work and go home at the end of the day, for those men who just rather sit and relax at the end of the day, maybe have a beer, for those guys, processing is a much simpler process. It's a much simpler set of actions because they don't feel their emotions deeply. They don't have deep emotions. Of course, they do have emotions. They hit a deer, they're going to feel something, but not till later. But it's not this complex series of sadness and grief and surprise and all the other things that happen. For those kinds of guys, for the warrior type guys, they have very simple emotions and they feel them simply. And for them, it's actually harmful for us to encourage them or demand that they process those in the same way that other people do. Because it undermines their effectiveness. It undermines their strength. It undermines their ability to just show up and do what they have to do. In fact, I would argue that a lot of the reason that warrior men are having difficulty, are turning to alcohol or drugs, or turning to addictions or other vices, I would argue that the reason that warrior men are becoming less and less effective is because we're asking them to be emotionally available, emotionally vulnerable, and emotionally intelligent. But for warrior type guys, emotional intelligence is a simple thing. Do you have them? Great. If yes, awesome. If no, that's okay. I'm sure you have them under there. You just don't know where they are at. And can you exist when you have emotions? Because they do still need to process their emotions. But for a warrior type guy, processing his emotions might mean sitting down and watching a baseball game. Processing his emotions might be going out for drinks with the guys, or just sitting down at the end of the day and having a beer around fire, or going camping for a week, going fishing or hunting, doing something that doesn't require him to show up for others. For the warrior type guy, processing his emotions, emotional intelligence is a very simple process. It's a very simple thing to do. All he's got to do is not need to be to serve, to provide, to protect for a short time, depending on the severity of the emotion that he has felt. It might need to be for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days. But if you give him that time, and he doesn't need to talk about it, he doesn't need to process it. Maybe he does, and some of them do, but they're not deeply held and complex, um, convoluted emotions. They might say something like, well, I'm glad I was able to do that. I was glad I was able to help. Or that was certainly scary, wasn't it? Or wow, I can't believe that just happened. And that's it. That's the feelings. For warrior type men, if you want to help the man in your life who's a warrior, or if you are a warrior, you don't need to be all of that vulnerable stuff. In fact, it could be harmful to do so. What most of us get wrong about warrior type men is they don't need emotional sensitivity, emotional vulnerability. In fact, do they not just not need them? That could be harmful for them to go too far with that. Let the warrior guys be strong and independent and emotionally shallow. That's what they're good at. That's what allows them to be good at their job, at their chosen vocation, at at protecting and providing for their families and their communities. Allow that. Not just allow it, but maybe encourage it. Now, of course, this only works for the warrior type men. For the other guys and for women, we need a lot more processing, a lot more conversation, talk it out, feel it, process it, understand our emotions. But for us warrior types, we don't need very much of that. Stop trying to pull out of us what doesn't exist, what isn't in there. This is what we can do to help ourselves as warriors. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.